Welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast, your guide for living a life by design. Here, we explore the journey of becoming an outlier, finding your purpose, mastering your mindset, optimizing your health, achieving financial freedom, and building a life centered around your passions. So tune in, transform, and thrive. Welcome to the Outlier Mindset. Let the journey begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Rodman Schley. So happy to have you here today. You know, on our shows, we talk about the 5 pillars of really excelling and being an outlier in life. Well, today, we're going to talk about getting our bodies right. And I got an incredible guest in Paul Fetters. This guy has diligently studied the effects of nutrition and exercise on human physiological performance for more than 30 years. He's worked with some of the top amateur and professional athletes throughout the world. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Now, we're excited to have you here too. You know, one of the biggest pillars that I'm always teaching people about when they're designing that life, the one that they want to be living, is you got to get your health right. You got to get your physical being right so that you can optimize who you are, how you perform, what you do. And I know your background, you've worked with a lot of athletes and a lot of just people in general who are looking to optimize their health. So I'm really excited to have you here on the show.
I consider myself very fortunate that I've been able to work with people over the last 50 years and help teach them the opportunity of a better quality of life, whether they're an athlete or Joe Blow on the street. So yeah, it's been rewarding, to say the least.
Why is it so important in your mind that we have our physical being optimized to be as healthy as we can be to take on our days?
It starts first thing in the morning, doesn't it? It's kind of there's a mindset that people that are healthy tend to wake up with, and I think they embrace the day because just their level of fitness. And so the mindset starts getting straight on gratitude on how they're feeling about themselves and what they can impart, whether it's their family or coworkers. I think that when you are feeling good about yourself, that carries over into every aspect of your life, certainly business and friendships and relationships on all levels. So that's a big part of it for me. It's not just the physical way you look, but it's the way that you're feeling and functioning during the day. That's really where you can make the biggest impact.
And I kind of feel like if you've got the opposite going, it has the negative impact. Like if you're feeling out of shape or worn out or tired, not physically in a place that you want to be, it takes you to the other side of the equation where you're getting up, you're not feeling good, you're not ready to take on those tasks, you're not ready to take on those days.
No, I think you're exactly right. And I think if you talk to this group of people that they have trouble getting out of bed, and it's the same thing, had trouble getting going during the day, and maybe they're wishy-washy about what their day looks like, or if they're going to eat breakfast or not eat breakfast. I mean, there's so many different questions there that people are so confused with because there's so much information out there that, yeah, starting out on the wrong foot if you're not feeling good.
So let's talk about information because, I mean, every time I wake up, every time I go read something, I figure out what I've been eating's wrong, or, you know, it seems like everything is bad for you, or now all this stuff is good for you. It just is it changes significantly all the time. And so I feel like I'm eating right, or I feel like I'm getting the nutritional value that I need to get through my days. But then I read something that says, no, you're doing it all wrong. How do you sort all that information out? How do you sort that data out? What's reliable? What can I count on?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I like to do, if there's a study or something new that's coming out, I'm going to know who's behind the study, right? I mean, there was a while back where Gatorade came out with a study about how sugar is very important in pre and post drinks. And of course, that's what they're selling. So that's the number one thing that I look at. And the other part is, honestly, our nutrition company is called Balanced Habits. And we believe, and it's funny, we just did this yesterday, we did a post about balanced eating and how balance works in every part of your life, whether it's relationships, business, certainly nutrition, fitness. I mean, you should not go crazy on either spectrum. So nutrition, I think, is especially important. Somebody asked me the other day, like, hey, what's the best diet? Well, it's the one that you'll stick to, number one, and something that's sustainable. So when you have a group of people that are asking you to cut out a whole food group, you should run in the other direction. right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's balance
Right.
of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. They each have a place in our meal planning because when you eat all three together, there's actually a chemical cascade that happens that's going to keep your energy sustained throughout the day. It's going to help repair your body on a cellular level continually. I love the dietary fats because it helps slow down the absorption of the carbohydrates. You stay full longer, so you aren't thinking about food all the time. I mean, it's the worst thing you can do on a nutrition program is tell people what they can't have.
Yeah. Right.
Because that's the thing that they're going to start obsessing about. So I think balance, and then listening to your own body, how you're feeling, if you're sleeping, what your energy is like. That's kind of where we're coming from. Because honestly, Rodman, there's no one perfect diet for everyone. That's why when we work with someone, we're going to really find out who they are, what their goals are, gender, age, activity level, all these different categories, so that we can establish what's the best program for them on a sustainable level. That's where the success happens.
So, Paul, when you say sustainability, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, it's a nutrition program that you can stay with. Going straight keto is not sustainable because you can't be social. You can't, you're at people's homes. They're supplying carbohydrates. You're not supposed to do it. It's not realistic in life. So it's not really sustainable. A lot of diets work short term. They get some great results, but then they go back to normal eating because it's not sustainable and they end up putting the weight back on. So we're all about, I say we, Bounce Habits, our company, my wife and I are all about sustainability. Do you want a quick fix or do you want a permanent fix? And if you want a permanent one, then we have to figure something that can work in your lifestyle where you are, fit your needs with your goals. And that's what makes it sustainable.
I feel like a lot of people want to go all in. Like they get into that diet, they want to go all in. They get into that exercise program, they want to go all in. But I've always talked to my family and people that I work with about just smart and being in moderation. I mean, things don't have to be extreme one way or the other. When you're talking about what you put into your body, like we pay a lot of close attention to our calorie intake, right? And, when I'm trying to cut a few pounds, it's kind of taking in less than taking in less calories than you're burning in a day, that kind of thing. Is there any kind of advice that you might have for people in terms of when they're looking at their meals or looking at their meal plans, what they should be looking at? Is there something that they could focus in on and maybe not do something to the extremes, but do something that really would work for them and be something that they can be successful with?
First of all, great question. I love to address this because I think this is important. And it kind of goes back to balance. I think you should look at your plate and you should have each of the three macronutrients: protein, carbohydrate, and fats. Because one of the things that happens when you cut out one of those is you tend to eat more of the other, and then there's a tendency to maybe overeat. So, hopefully most people know what the different sources of proteins are. I know that's kind of a struggle sometimes. That's why Google is so great. Like, Google, tell me all the different sources of protein. Carbohydrates are interesting because they get kind of a bad rap, especially in the fitness industry, because it's really easy to overeat carbohydrates. And they're the things that taste the best. And we tend to eat those first. And, there's a lot of not necessarily great choices. I don't want to say bad choices, because one of the sayings in our company is there's no such thing as bad foods. There's only bad portion size, which gives you a tremendous amount of freedom, which is like another thing I want people to realize. It's like pasta got a bad rap years and years ago by saying that, oh, pasta makes you fat. Well, no, inherently pasta is not bad for you. Matter of fact, it breaks down into glucose, which people call blood sugar, which is necessary for the function. But it's just very easy to overeat it. Like, you don't typically sit down to a small cup of pasta. When we have pasta, we have a big bowl. That's where we get in trouble. And the other part is the dietary fats to add in there, because there is so much useful good that comes from having fats in your system. It's interesting because 30 years ago it was a big fat-free craze, and they realized, okay, that doesn't work. That wasn't the issue. That wasn't what was causing cardiac events, what have you. So they've added that back in. They've added, on the food pyramid, they've had fish, they've had eggs back in. So they're realizing it's just all about portion control. just to give you a final answer, look at that plate and make sure you have all three of those macronutrients on a very controlled portion level.
So how do people take a look at their calorie intake and say, okay, for my body or for my weight or for my age, how do you start calculating how many calories you should take in a day to, if you were going to be balanced? Like I'm not looking to lose weight. I'm not looking to, beef up a little bit. How do you calculate?
Well, Rodman, I wish I could give you a definite answer, but because we're all so different, we have different activity levels. You could have a twin that weighs 20 pounds more than you, that's inactive compared to your lifestyle, and that would be completely different caloric intake. So again, I would just go to Google and say, hey, I'm this age, I'm this gender, I'm this activity level, here's my weight, and then it will give you a general idea. And then you just kind of what makes sense during the day. If you feel like you're overeating in a meal, you probably are. If you're stuffed and not feeling good, yeah, that's probably too much. So I always tell people, if you love that meal so much, have it again 3-4 hours later. Don't have a second helping of it right then.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
not eating between meals is super important. Having controlled portion size is super important. You should leave a meal comfortable. That's why they talk about, taking 20 minutes, take your time when you're eating. That feeling of being satiated, of being full is a real thing that will happen, as opposed to like, this is so good, I can't stop eating,
What I try to do, when I'm doing my meals and my planning and such, I try to get as much protein as I can. I know they say, and again, this is, you hear a billion different ways, but they say about a pound of body weight should be a gram of protein in your body, and I'm about a 180 pound person. And so for me, it's like trying to get 180,
can be a
grams
challenge.
of protein in my body. It's a challenge. I mean, without trying to supplement a little bit or doing some protein shakes. What do you tell people there? Because I know a lot of people don't think about, like, I track my micros and my macros and I track my calorie intake, but a lot of people don't do that. Is there any kind of measures or some rough thinking that people should be getting when they're sitting down to a meal? Like, make sure you're having 4 ounces of, maybe chicken breasts, or is there anything that you would advise people to do?
Yeah. Another great question. We're going to end up giving some great advice here today. I think it's going to be able to help a lot of people. First of all, you look great. So whatever you're doing, I would say, as long as your energy is pretty sustained through the day and you're sleeping well, I would say you're nailing it. As far as the protein goes, so it's interesting, right? So if we went with your theory, or not your theory, but what you've read and what you've heard, it's like a gram for every pound that you weigh. So does that mean a guy that weighs 300 pounds, that's maybe 50% body fat, should have 300 grams? No.
No way.
No. What you need to feed is your lean body mass. In other words, if you're 180 pounds and you have 10% body fat, you've got 18 pounds of stored fat, which is actually a really good number. So you would subtract the 18 pounds from your 180 pounds, and that's your lean mass. And that's what you want to feed. So in your case, it'd be 162 pounds?
Yeah.
So 162 grams would be more realistic if you were 10%, which would be pretty amazing between you and me. So then the next step is not to try to get it all in one meal. I think a lot of people do that. They have breakfast, they have oatmeal or some cereal, and then lunch is a salad, whatever. And then they're like, oh, I'm way behind on my protein. I need to get 100 grams for dinner. That doesn't work. That's too much at one time. Our bodies can only assimilate so much food at one time. And so if you have protein with every meal, you're going to have a better chance of hitting that 162 grams in a day. And then you can break it down even further and again, Google, hey, how many grams of protein in an egg? And then, or in egg, or in a 7-ounce piece of chicken. So you start to know those numbers, and then you can put it together, and it's like, okay, look, I need to have, 40 grams, at least 45 grams 4 times a day, and I'm going to hit my number. And that's kind of how you go about creating that meal.
Yeah, I feel like there's some great apps out there too right now that can help you. I mean, I know that I've got a great app, and every time I'm tracking a meal, I can see exactly how many calories are in per serving, and then I can ask for my servings, and then it gives me my macros and my micros. So I know if I'm hitting or missing. Sometimes I forget to do it in a day, but for the most part, I'm consistently tracking And then I'm adjusting. If I don't feel like I'm getting enough, at least if you're tracking it and you're seeing what you're intaking, you've got the know to be able to shift if you need to shift, if you need more protein or what have you. But I think we're set up right now better than ever to be sick. When I was a kid, we didn't know anything about nutrition. I mean, my basketball coach used to tell us to gorge on pasta so we'd have a lot of energy for the basketball game, right? And that was about it.
Well, the crazy part is that's mentality is still out there. When I talk to people, and they're going to do a 5K, which is nothing. You're not going to burn hardly any calories on a 5K. I'm sorry. And they're eating pasta the day before, thinking like, oh, I have to have all this energy. Like that is crazy, and that's what gets a lot of people in trouble. So I understand that. I mean, I was a high school wrestler, and we didn't know anything about nutrition. And of course, all the coaches want you to wrestle one weight class less than your natural weight, thinking you'll be the strongest there. And we would starve ourselves and end up being weak. And that's like, okay, that just made sense for me. That doesn't work. So my nutrition journey started probably when I was around 17, and I was really discovered weightlifting, strength training. And I was starting to see my body change, to really ask questions of other bodybuilders and see what I could read and find out how important nutrition was to that. So that began my journey, not only of bodybuilding, but of nutrition. And it has really served me, because in the late 70s, when I started competing in bodybuilding, the diet was to cut out carbohydrates for 3 months. And that was awful. You felt awful. Right. And I thought, if I'm going to do this as a career, I got to figure something out, because I have the discipline to do it, but it just didn't make sense. So, I mean, my whole journey kind of came from that. And you're right that back in the day, there wasn't a lot of nutritional education. Whereas now, I mean, we're inundated with maybe almost too much, because like you said, it's hard to know what's right.
I think the same thing. I'm always thinking about, like, okay, now we're to that other side of the extreme where it's like we're trying to sort out the data. And then, like you said, where does that report come from? Okay, well, of course, the Dairy Association is going to tell us that drinking milk is great. And yeah, there's a lot of attributes that are correct on that, but really understanding what's true and what's not true is very difficult nowadays. But I think if you boil it down, and I think you guys are doing this, boiling it down, simplifying it, saying, listen, here's what you're not going to go wrong with. You're not going to go wrong with the whole foods. You're not going to go wrong with the balanced nutrition sitting on your plate. But I guess a question that I'd have for you, I always heard that maybe when it comes to meats, when it comes to animal proteins, it's like 4 ounces per meal a day it's been recommended. I don't know if it's right or if it's wrong, but how in the world with the number of meals that you have in a day, do you get the protein that you need? And I know that, those people who are vegan or vegetarian are going to say, hey, you can get in plants too. And I agree, that's great. But it seems like it's a much bigger lift to get enough protein through your plant proteins to make it through your day. How do you get that balance, the right balance?
First of all, it was a great question you asked earlier about how many grams you think we need, and is it really for the body weight? So I think establishing what you need as an individual is the number one goal, because if somebody's coming through our program and they have a weight loss goal, we're not going to do 1 gram for every lean pound of muscle that they carry. We need to put them in a little bit of a deficit, and depending on what those numbers look like, it might be 0.9, 0.8, even 0.7 of how much they actually need. And then to have it spread out throughout the day is important. So, but to get back to answer your question, one of the things I'd love to talk about is when I say there's no such thing as bad foods, only bad portion size, is honestly, our bodies are so efficient, so amazing. And you talk about that 4 ounces. So let's just take steak, because everyone knows, should probably stay away from that. It's very fattening, this and that. But if you have 4 ounces of steak and you ate that, your body it'd be like putting it into an incinerator. Your body would just absolutely attack every part of it, use every part of it. That would not be too much. But what do we do as humans? We love steak. We haven't had it in a month. I'm going to go and eat 12 ounces at one sitting. That's the problem. That's what's going to kill you. That's what's going to clog things up and slow things down. So 4 ounces of steak for a guy who needs 1 pound per gram of lean mass, you could do that every single day, honestly, and it would never hurt you. I mean, I talk to cardiologists all day long, and they'll agree it's the quantity, not it's too much at one time. That's the problem. So with chicken,
Yeah.
to reach your 30 grams per meal or 35, 7 ounces perfectly fine. Fish, 7 ounces perfectly fine for most active male men. Okay, just to give you an example. So first of all, I'm surprised that I still love egg whites and tuna because I've been eating that for 40 years in my competitive journey.
Long
But
time. Yeah.
I eat for a purpose. I eat because the way it makes me feel, the way it makes me look, the way it helps my quality of life. Now that I'm older, I got grandkids. I mean, it's really interesting how my priorities have really shifted to that good health and have that good quality of life. And so much of it is directed at food. So common sense plays a big role. I mean, our mothers taught most of us the right thing to do: lean meats, fish, fruits, and vegetables. I mean, none of that just makes sense. Why can't we just go back to that?
Well, yeah, simplify, right? I mean, go back to the way things used to be cooked, the simple way. And we grow a lot of our foods too here, which is awesome. But we try to do a lot of whole foods ourselves. But one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot these days is, and again, a report, I have not verified this data, but they're saying that we're living 3 to 4 months longer for every year that we're on the planet right now, right? We're able to extend our life 3 to 4 months for every year that we're here, which is an incredible stat to me. And they're also saying that because of all these advances in AI and a lot of the technology that we're getting, that's just going to keep getting more and more. We're going to keep pushing our lives out. Now, the one thing that we don't want to do in our lives, we've seen it with, maybe our grandparents, people that we love who have outlived their mental capacities or outlived themselves physically, right? And so there's that quality of life issue. But for me, a lot of the reasons that I like to get up and work really hard on me, because I want to be here a long time for my kids. I want to be here a long time when they have grandkids. I want to be able to be in as good a shape as I can to be able to capitalize on those medical advances where we can live these longer lives. And so for me, nutrition and exercise is just as important about longevity. And I'm in my, I'm 54, going to be 55 this year. And I think a lot about, say, muscle mass, right? Making sure that I'm going to have adequate muscle mass to take me as far as I can go. What do you do for people, or what do you suggest for people who are trying to extend their lives and have better years later in life? What kind of things should they be doing now in terms of, say, exercise?
I'm so happy that you asked me that question, because that's what I do. I mean, my motto right now is to help people live a good quality of life, whatever age. And I know I can make the biggest impact on, honestly, from people 60 and over, especially if they've never strength trained. So the new fountain of youth is strength training. I mean, you said it, having muscle, keeping muscle on your body. It's obviously, as a 60-year-old plus, to add muscle is a little bit difficult unless you're a very rank beginner and you've never really done it. You will actually add some lean mass and help you structurally. Makes a huge difference. I'm so happy that I started as early in life as I did, because now as a 67-year-old, I have the amount of mass still on my body from saving it, right? I have a hard time gaining any, but I work so hard to keep as much as possible, because that's going to help the quality of my life, and it will help everybody. Strength training is everything. And there's a great book that's out that I just love to recommend called Younger Next Year. And it's a doctor, and it's also one of his patients. So they talk from the patient side of how it affects his life. And then the doctor loves to talk about, on a cellular level, what strength training does and what balanced eating does. And I like to break it down succinctly and say that we have cells that die and are replaced every single day. Like the cells on our tongue are replaced every single day. Our muscles about every 3 months, our bones about every year. And so what happens is, when you're aging, the doctor like to call that decaying, because when your cell dies, the next one that comes in is a little bit weaker. That's natural aging, very natural. But what he's saying is that if you start strength training in a balanced diet and become more active, that cell actually comes back stronger than the previous cell. So, I mean, let's just say we got a 40-year-old guy who's never strength trained. He's 20 pounds overweight. He's pretty inactive. If he in the next year, lost that 20 pounds, started strength training, became more active. He's a younger version of himself a year later. The way he feels, the way he functions, I mean, every part of his body. And that's the opportunity. So strength training, number one goal, keep as much muscle as possible. Because that's, it's our tendons and ligaments that hold our skeletal together, but it's the muscles really that are moving us around. And that is what atrophies or goes away, if you will, as we get older. And so we need to fight to keep as much muscle as possible.
So let's think in terms of that person, Paul, who's sitting at home. Maybe they've been sitting for a little bit too long. Maybe they haven't been eating right for a little too long, whatever it might be. And they're sitting there going, well, this sounds great. It's going to be overwhelming for me to take some action. I got to start somewhere. But what would you tell those people? Because I kind of feel like a lot of people say, well, just go all in. And I think that somebody gets pretty frustrated when they just go all in instead of working their way through and working their way back. So what kind of recommendations would you have for that person sitting there? Where should I start?
That's great. Again, you got the best questions because these are all really important. So I work with a lot of people remotely on helping them establish what they should do. That's funny. I just did a post about New Year's, like, hey, don't go all in. Don't say I'm going to train 5 days a week for an hour because that's unrealistic, especially if you haven't done anything. Let's talk about 2 days a week, 20, 30 minutes. You don't even have to go to a gym. You could start with using resistance bands that are very inexpensive. And they come with this chart of different exercises. And you do a couple movements for your body and just get started, right? And then what I do when I'm working with people is I'll set them up on a routine based off where they are in their life, what they're capable of, time-wise, mentality, mindset, everything. And then I let them ask me. It's like, hey, I've done it now for 2 weeks all the way through. Can I like add another exercise or can I add another day? And I'm like, absolutely, as opposed to saying like, you need to do it this many times. You need to add this, you need to add this. And as they see results, they want more. And that's the best part. So
could it be as simple as a walk, Paul? I know there's some, I've heard multiple things. I've heard people say, hey, walks aren't as good as they say they are. And for me, I love walking for multiple reasons, not just because it physically feels good, but it's always a good opportunity for me to throw in a podcast. It's a good opportunity for me to clear my mind and think more clearly. So, what about just something as simple as a walk, getting out, starting 30 minutes a day and then increasing that up and just continuing to work through something like that?
Yeah, I love it. And that's a perfect example of an easy way to start, just getting outside, clearing your mind a little bit. Everything that you said of how walking helps you is important for people. And I don't think they realize some of those benefits of just getting out in the air and doing something. So I tell people, hey, 15 minutes is 100% more than zero. And so you're successful immediately. And then if you can do it with a spouse or a friend, and then the conversations, you're away from the phones, you're away from the screens, and you just see where the conversations goes, there's an opportunity there. And so I think it's all good. So yeah, just start, don't even start like I have to do 15 minutes every day. Just like, I'm going to do it 3 days a week, 2 days a week. And you will build on that because you'll not only see the physiological changes, your mindset will start changing, your relationships with your friends, if you're walking with someone, starts changing. It's all good.
I kind of feel like my best ideas come to mind when I'm out walking. My crew here, every time I go out, they know that something's going to come back into the room once I get done walking, because it's just an opportunity to get the blood flowing, get thinking, get out of the environment that you're sitting in. I feel like people get so caught up in where they're at and what they're doing that sometimes they get, I don't want to call it complacent or laziness, but you get used to doing things one way, and then it's hard to break out of the pattern. But I feel like once you start taking that first walk, or you go do that first set of reps, when you're starting to work out. But then again, I've seen people go to the gym and they just pack on the weights. Maybe they used to work out. Maybe in high school they used to lift a lot, and they think they can just go back in and hammer out a workout. And then then for 2 weeks they can't get out of the bed because
Yeah.
because they overdid it. And I don't think that that's healthy either. I feel like if people have been sitting for a while, it's important to take your time, be methodical, and know that this isn't about, okay, I'm going to be in great shape in a week. It's about the long run. It's about the journey over the long period of time, not just what's going to happen in the first week or the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, just ongoing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had a surgical operation a couple of years back where I couldn't train for a couple months actually. And the minute I got the okay by the doctor I can start training again, I went back into the gym and I had lost quite a bit in a couple months. I felt weak. I knew I needed to start a little bit slower. And I remember saying to a group of people, I said, I don't care how long it takes. This is what I'm doing. A year from now, I know I'm going to be back on my feet, and that's all I care about. So I think a lot of people, they don't get started because they think they're too old, it's too late, I'm too heavy, I've been dormant too long, and they think it's this huge commitment. Like, if I don't do it for a year, I'm not going to get anything out of it. But honestly, the minute you start, the minute you take that walk, the very first time, again, I like to call it a chemical cascade that happens in your body. It's like, whoa, we can start breathing better. This is great. Movement is natural as a human being. And honestly, the very first time you do it, it helps. Same thing with food. I always say you're only as bad as is the last meal, only good or as bad as your last meal. So pizza was always my favorite thing. I think most bodybuilders would say that, coming off a diet, gorge on pizza, and then put that meal behind us, get right back on track. It's like it never happened,
Right.
And so you can feel the same on a physical level. If you think about it in those terms, that everything you do makes a positive or negative difference, right? So let's just try to keep it positive.
Well, and I feel like you can get up and you can make these changes. I feel like, we're going to fall every once in a while. We're going to eat, more than we wanted to eat, or we're going to eat, a little bit worse in a day, or maybe we didn't get our exercise in. But I think the biggest thing is just not quitting. Don't give up, still fight through that. Get up tomorrow, just get back on track. Where I think a lot of people, they'll let themselves down a day, and then it's the next day, and then it's the next day. And then they think they've lost it. It's kind of like, right now I'm kind of down and out with my back. So I've lost right now about 7+ days of my normal exercise routine. And I feel it. I mean, I'm struggling. It kind of brings me down a little bit, but getting back on that horse, you want to get back on that horse when you can. You don't want to physically hurt yourself, right? It's just like, even if you go in and try to do that workout where you're trying to do too much right out of the gates, you're risking physically hurting yourself, and you're going to set yourself back that next week or that next week. But I think there's so much importance to going, okay, understanding that I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be able to get this done every day. I'm not going to be able to eat exactly how I should be eating every day. But as long as I know that I can get back up that next day and then continue to take care of myself, I think you're going to be okay long term.
Well, that's what we talk about with balance. And I think you have a great mindset, and you know that you've experienced this. You understand your body enough to know that you need to give it a break and not try to push through the back pain that you're suffering from. And same with me. It's like, I'm not listening to my doctor. I'm going to wait till he gives me the clearance, and I'm going to start slow, and I'm going to take care of it. So I love to say to people, like, listen, 3 months from now, we're either going to be high-fiving each other because you've started this journey, or you're going to have a conversation there where you wish that you had 3 months ago. Guaranteed. Every person that we help on a nutritional level or a physical level with the strength routine that has success, man, they're like, oh, I wish I'd done this years ago. And in some case, decades ago, because they now they realize what's available as a quality of life. And that's the biggest thing. At any age, right? Yeah. Quality of life is the key at any age. I have a brother who's 80 years old, who's unbelievably fit. And that's just kind of how our family grew up. My dad was an All-American lacrosse player. He was an athlete. All of our toys growing up in Michigan were unicycles, stilts, ropes, high bars. In our basement, we had a wrestling mat, boxing gloves, a weight set, so it was just natural for all of us. My 77-year-old sister can still do 6 chin-ups. It's really fun. My brother, who just turned 70, did 70 chin-ups in under 9 minutes. So these stories are just amazing, and it's available for everybody if they just get started.
Yeah, and it seems to me too, when you get to that age, of course, you hear it all the time about that grandparent or an elderly person who falls and breaks the hip, and then that's kind of like it, right? I mean, it happens over and over. But even at like your brother being the age he is, I'm sure his balance is much better. I'm sure his muscle tone is a lot better, so that he can avoid some of those potential pitfalls that you hit when you start to get up there in age.
Yeah. Now we're talking about mortality, right? It's a whole different conversation. Now you shouldn't do it just to look good and to feel better. You should save your life, because like you said, you fall and you break a femur or a hip. I mean, I don't even want to talk about the percentage of people that die within a year of that happening that are that age and have that lack of balance and recovery. It's a tough statistic. And it needs, and people need to see it for what it is and get started. The earlier the better, obviously, but it's never too late. Never too late.
That's what I keep telling people, and because there's different levels that you can come in and you can be healthy. It doesn't matter if you're, somebody coming in their 30s might look a lot different than that guy who's just starting out, who's, maybe 70. But you can still add that muscle mass. You can still get that diet right. You can still be doing a lot of those things if you want to extend out that life or get that longevity. Of course, there's no guarantees in life. We know that, right? I mean,
get hit by a bus tomorrow.
You could be, yeah, exactly. You're not going to do much about that, right? I mean, that's going to skew that mortality rate. But I feel like there's always something, as long as we're upright, that we can always be doing to get ourselves physically better. And, food, the foods that we eat and the exercise that we do, I mean, what else is there after that?
You alluded to it earlier about the medical community and just in general, people living longer, right? There's better medicine, there's better care, people are living longer. But how do you want to live? Like, how do you want to feel when you're 80 years old? You want to be on a walker, or do you want to be able to still play pickleball, as an example? Take walks, take hikes, that kind of stuff. Enjoy life. I've got a 80-year-old neighbor who's a complete opposite of my 80-year-old brother, who on a walker, and I just tell him, at the very least, you got to get outside. You got to breathe some air. I mean, practice getting up off a chair. Every little thing you do is going to make a difference at any age.
I play ice hockey now, and in doing so, by the way, I'm horrible at it. I started late in life. I was about 40 years old, never had ice skated in my life.
Oh my goodness!
I got talked into playing ice hockey, and I always think to myself, I'm pushing 55. It's like, well, how long can I do this? How long am I physically? I always tell myself, if I can't get over the boards and not have to go to the door, I don't want to go to the door. The second I go to the door, I'm going to have to hang up the skate. So, I just kind of feel like, at any age that you're at, there's something there for you. It just is a matter of really identifying what that is, and then really being smart about how you start to execute on it. Walk into it. You don't have to run into it. I think that one of the biggest mistakes people make is like, they go so extreme on their diet and they go, well, I don't want to eat like this for my whole life. And then they just give up on the diet. Yeah. It's like, don't do it. I even hate the word diet. I kind of feel like, even though diet kind of encompasses a lot of different things, I just kind of feel like it's how we eat. How do you want to integrate the foods that you're eating into your lifestyle long-term? Don't think of it as a diet. This is just a lifestyle change. Same thing with fitness.
Yeah. And don't try to be perfect. That's the thing. I think too many people think they need to be so strict and so perfect. We've talked about this the whole time. That's not necessary. Just start, be smart about it, become more active. Don't set unrealistic goals. Just try to look back on the day and say, yeah, pretty good day. I ate well. I was more active. Yeah. Little things like that. And the same thing. If I lost a day, if I lost a week, doesn't matter. Get right back on, because everything changes immediately when you start up again. I don't care if you had 10 terrible meals, overate every one of them, and they're way too much sugar. I mean, we know what's eating bad is. And the minute you eat a good one, your body's like, there we are. And then, let's go.
If you could give one piece of advice on nutrition, like I'm sure that you've got this plethora of advice that you give to people, but if you could narrow it down and go, here's one piece, if we're going to come away with any one thing when it comes to nutrition, what would that piece of advice be?
Do not eat between meals. I'm going to sound like your mother now. Because when you have a meal, in between is when your body is digesting and it's using everything that it needs for energy, for repair, whatever it happens to be. The minute you eat anything, like let's say it's 2 hours later and you get this little bit of hunger because you're bored or whatever, and it might be dinner's an hour away. My wife likes to say, even one grape, when you eat that, there's all these chemical responses that happen from your mouth that sends a message down to your body. It's like, oh, stop burning any fat because we have calories coming in. It doesn't know that you're stopping at one grape. It literally puts the brakes on any fat burning because it's in between the meals that you're burning the most amount of stored fat. So it's important to not eat in between meals. So have a meal, don't eat, get active. If you're hungry, drink some water. Try to stay on some type of schedule because our bodies like stability. Like I know I've trained my body that it doesn't need any body fat by giving it everything that it needs on a regular basis. And it knows exactly what time of day it's going to be eating and what portion sizes. And it's super comfortable and it's really easy to do. So
same question on getting your body right physically. What would you say on exercise would be one piece that you'd say, do this because it's going to be good for you?
Yeah, no question. I know we talked about walking, really easy to get started, but the goal should be strength training. The goal should be to retain as much muscle on your body as you age. That is going to directly affect the quality of your life and how your body functions.
Yeah. And just start doing. So just get out and start doing something.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you got to start square one. I mean, there's so many things I think about. Again, I wish I knew as a kid that I know now, that I just think we have so much more opportunities to be smart about our exercise and our diets. We've got so many tools, we've got so many resources, we got so many good things that can help guide us along that journey. Again, being a kid, I'd go to McDonald's, and I thought that was kind of the treat at home, right? When you go to McDonald's, and not to be disparaging about McDonald's, but I think there's a lot of healthier ways to be eating than we used to.
Yeah, but at the same time, when we talk about no such thing as bad foods, only bad portion size, or giving yourself a break, or not trying to be perfect, there's room to have that burger once in a while. There's room to have those things that you enjoy. I don't think you have to cut out all the things you enjoy. Let's just do it in moderation, right? I mean, if you love Oreo cookies and you do without, and you've been dying for them for a month, the chances of you stopping at a couple of them is pretty slim.
Right.
Like it'd be better if you allowed yourself to have one or two on occasion, so you're not craving it so much and you don't feel like you're depriving yourself.
So
you're going to be
the ideal word there again being moderation, right? I mean, making sure that you work it into your diet, you work it into your daily diet, but make sure that you're accounting for it. Make sure you're not overeating. Make sure you're not sitting down and eating that entire bag of M&Ms, which is hard for me when I get a bag of M&Ms.
We all have our thing. I used to say that famous Amos chocolate chip cookies after I competed, but I felt like there was a sign on my head, like that's what I wanted, But just a real quick story, if you don't mind. I had a buddy who called me and he goes, "Paul, you got to help me." He says, "I have cookies and milk every single night before I go to bed. I mean, if my wife doesn't hear the cabinet creaking open, something's missing when I go to get the glass of milk." And he said, "I can't stop. I know it's not good for me, but I love it, I said, "Well, first of all, you don't have to stop. Obviously, it's something you really enjoy. And 7 days a week, that's a little bit out of control. How about if you cut back 2 days a week? Could you do that? Like just pick 2 days that you're not going to have it the rest of the 5 days, enjoy it." And he said, "I can easily do that." So he did that. And then he comes back to me like a week later. He goes, "I cut out a third day because it's easy to do. And I know it's better for me." And it got to a point where he was just having it twice a week. And not only is it not hurting him, but he could enjoy it more. He wasn't beating himself up because he's, as much as he loved it, he was beating himself up for doing it. So now he's like, you have permission. It's not hurting you. A couple of days a week, no big deal. Like everybody's happy. It's rather because he wanted me to help him cut it out of his life.
Yeah. Well, so Paul, where would a couple of things. So where do you want people to come to find you?
Balancedhabits.com is our website of our nutrition company. On Facebook, it's just Paul Fetters. And on Instagram, it's Paul Fetts, Fetts. And that's where you can find me.
I'll get those put in the show notes so that people can find you pretty easy. But I got one more question for you before we finish up. If you could go back in time and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would that one piece of advice be?
I can say from experience, I feel so blessed because, Rodman, I realized very early that I loved being in the gym. That made me happy. So I knew I needed to figure out a career that I could be in a gym. So when I left Michigan at 19 years old to go out to Gold Stream in Venice to start my bodybuilding career, I was over the moon happy. So I really followed what my love was, even though my parents are like, what? You're leaving? You're like, everybody's here. You're going to California. You have no money. What are you doing? You know? So I went there, and personal training didn't exist back in the 80s. It was something that I just started to do because I'm that guy helping people. So I made a career with that. I opened up personal training studios. So I was working in a gym, like I was going to work in a gym every day. So I never felt like I had to work. So I would just say, you know, going back to your daughters of not really knowing what they love yet, like it takes time to discover where your jam is in a sense, you know, and I was fortunate that I found mine and I pursued that, and my whole life revolved around that. To this day, my kids have benefited. I have benefited financially, physically, mentally. You know, find out what you love and try to do that.
Everything.
That's the advice.
You found your purpose, and you found it early.
I can do it forever too. I can still make a difference in people's lives. Yeah. And I love that. And I will always be able to do that.
Life is good. And you're lucky to have found it that early. A lot of people do not find it that early. And, you know, that's okay. We find it, you know, along the path at different places and different times.
And I got to tell you, my mom, for like the first 6-7 years of doing personal training, she's never heard of that before. She's like, Paul, you got to go get a real job. I'm going, Mom, trust me, this is going to be great. This will be fine. It wasn't until I was married, had a couple of kids, we had a home in Huntington Beach, successful gyms, and she's like, wow, you sure picked the right industry. I'm like, you know, don't let anybody hold you down. Follow your dreams. And if people are trying to bag on you for it, then find new people to hang around, you know?
Yet a different tribe. I couldn't agree more. Well, Paul, thank you for being on the show today. I mean, it's been great. This has been very informative. I feel like we could have gone for another 3 hours. There's so many more questions I have for you. So I really appreciate what you've imparted with the audience today. And we'll have to get you on here again.
I'd love it. And I really enjoyed this. And thank you. You had such great questions. And I hoped everyone listening will benefit from that. Just understand moderation and health. It's just longevity is everything. Quality of life.
That's perfect.